A white cop humiliates a quiet black woman he assumes is homeless, only to spark a silent storm that begins with a fingerprint scan. In the heart of a wealthy district, his arrogance will meet a truth he never expected. We got vagrants again. Back alley. Looks like another crackhead, Officer Ryan Keller said into his radio, his voice full of bored irritation as he stepped out of his cruiser. The woman didn't move. She sat silently against the red brick wall behind the upscale bakery on West. Holden Street, legs crossed, a faded hoodie pulled over her head, holding a small cloth bag in her lap, like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to this world. Her shoes were worn, her jeans dusty, but her back was straight. Her face, though mostly hidden in shadow, didn't look broken. Ryan approached with the slow, deliberate strut of someone used to being obeyed before he even opened his mouth. He said. He kicked the toe of her shoe. "You can't sit here." She lifted her face. The eyes weren't what he expected, not panicking, not pleading, calm, clear, and sharp. Ryan's hand hovered near his holster. "ID?" She didn't move. He glanced around. A few baristas peered through the glass from inside the cafe. A couple walking their golden retriever paused at the corner. A man on a scooter stopped mid-scroll on his phone. The street, always buzzing, was now quieter than usual, holding its breath. "Stand up. Now." His voice echoed louder than intended. Still, she didn't budge, didn't even blink. Ryan reached down, yanked her to her feet by the arm. She didn't resist, but she didn't help either. "What's your name?" "Silence," I said. "What's your name?" From her pocket she calmly pulled out a tiny laminated card. Not an ID, not a driver's license, a clinic appointment slip. The name was smudged, water-damaged. Ryan scoffed. "Figures, no ID, no fixed address. Probably has warrants too." She looked him dead in the eye and said her first words, voice low, emotionless. "You're making a mistake." That irritated him. He snapped his cuffs on her wrists and shoved her toward the cruiser. "That's what they all say." The cloth bag fell to the pavement. A photo slipped out, black and white, creased. Ryan picked it up, a little boy in uniform hugging a woman. He tossed it back in the bag and kicked it aside. The onlookers were watching more intently now. A teenager recorded the scene quietly. A barista stepped outside and asked, "Is she okay?" "Go back inside," Ryan barked. She was in the back seat now, face turned toward the window, gaze unfocused but unafraid. No protest, no drama, just that haunting stillness. Back at the precinct, Ryan marched her in, pushing open the intake door like he was unloading a wild animal. "Got a transient." "No ID." Resisting, the processing officer raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The woman stood still, hands cuffed, lips sealed. "She doesn't talk." "Let's see if her prints do," Ryan muttered. They scanned her fingerprints. The machine blinked. "Processing." Ryan leaned on the counter, a beep, then a pause. Then a red notification flashed. "Match found, level 1 clearance. Federal record locked." Ryan frowned. "What the hell? Run it again." The intake officer was now fully upright, his hand frozen over the keyboard. 3 more officers stepped into the room as another alert sounded. "Sir," one of them whispered, "we need the captain." The woman finally spoke. Softly, "You really should have Googled me." The air changed. The door slammed open. Captain Mendez stormed in, tie undone, phone to his ear. He stopped when he saw her. His face was drained of color. The silence in the room could crush bone. She turned her face toward him. Her hoodie was off now. Her natural hair fell around her shoulders, elegant and wild. There was no grime on her skin, just shadows. "Agent Langston?" the captain finally asked, breathless. The woman nodded once. Ryan blinked, slowly, as if waking from a dream. "Wait. Agent? What agent?" The captain turned toward him with fire in his eyes. "You arrested a federal witness on surveillance rotation under Homeland clearance. But but she was sitting behind exactly where she was supposed to be, watching. A target, until you racially profiled her and disrupted an ongoing operation, Ryan staggered back. She was posing as homeless? He asked, voice shaking. No, she was blending in, doing her job, something you clearly don't know how to do. The woman looked at him, not with anger, not even pity, just the kind of silence that makes men unravel. She stepped forward, uncuffed now, picked up the cloth bag and the photo. Dusted it off. To you, she said calmly. I was invisible. You didn't even see the badge in my pocket. She held it up now. FBI, Special Operations Division. Ryan's throat tightened. Tell me, Officer Keller, she said, her voice dropping low. How many others have you cuffed for looking like me? She didn't wait for an answer. She walked past him, past the other stunned officers, past the captain. Ryan Keller sat in his cruiser, one hand on the steering wheel, the other wrapped around a lukewarm coffee he didn't remember buying. His uniform still smelled of the rain from last night, the same rain that soaked the woman he'd arrested. He told himself it didn't matter. She was nobody, just another drifter until the scanner said otherwise. But that voice, that face. He shook his head and clicked the radio. Unit 12, report of suspicious activity. Midtown parking structure, level B3. Copy that. En route, he replied. The streets of West Halden were clean this morning. Gentrified, polished, safe. But Keller knew better. Safety was just another layer of paint. He was the brush. As he pulled into the parking structure, a group of young kids skated past him, laughing. One of them stopped and pointed. Yo, that's the cop from the video. Keller stiffened. Keep moving, he barked. The kid mimicked, his voice mockingly. Keep moving, he said in a nasally tone before disappearing behind a concrete pillar. Ryan clenched his jaw. What video? Back at the precinct, Officer Marla Evans intercepted him near the lockers. Hey, she said, voice low. You see the footage? What footage? She pulled out her phone and tapped a screen. Ryan's face lit up in high definition, him dragging the woman, her voice calm and clear. You're making a mistake. Then the photo falls. The teenager's camera caught all of it, overlaid text in bold white letters read, she was FBI, he thought she was trash. The post had racked up 2.3 million views. Ryan stared at it. That's out of context. Doesn't matter anymore, Marla replied. Perception is the crime now. Command didn't say anything. Yet, but IA's sniffing around. Keller, she wasn't just FBI. She's tied to something bigger. Word is, Homeland's involved. Keller tried to laugh. What? You think I'm going to get fired over a mistake? Evans gave him a look. The kind you give someone who's already falling but hasn't felt the ground yet. Ryan, this isn't just about you anymore. It's about what you represent. She walked away. Ryan opened his locker. Tucked inside was a fresh citation from a traffic stop last week, unsigned, unread. His hands trembled just slightly. He told himself it was nothing. Public outrage always faded. Headlines changed, but deep down he knew this time something was different. But before she reached the door, she paused. I wasn't going to report this, she said. But now, she looked back once, eyes unreadable. I think it's time someone did. And with that she left the room in silence. Behind her, reputation started to fall, and Ryan Keller. He had no idea that a single fingerprint had just exposed everything. Agent Langston stood alone in a small, windowless room inside a federal safe house just outside the city limits. No badge, no gun, just a folder in her hands, and a decision weighing on her shoulders. The fingerprint match had activated more than just a red flag. It triggered a full cascade across federal networks. It wasn't just that she was FBI. It was what division she was part of and what operation she had been embedded in. Operation Crownfall. Even inside the agency, only a handful knew what the operation truly entailed. A tangled, years-long investigation into a secretive billionaire-backed network that had influence inside law enforcement, city councils, even federal oversight boards. Langston wasn't just a field agent. She was the key to breaking the silence around a nationwide cover-up. The woman Officer Keller thought was homeless? She was wearing the burden of an entire agency's secrets. She stared down at the photo Ryan had kicked aside the day before. Her son, 11 years old, in his junior cadet's uniform, smiling up at her. She pressed her fingers to the picture and whispered something no one would hear. Then she turned. Meanwhile, back in the precinct, Keller was in the briefing room trying to focus, trying to ignore the looks. The shift commander spoke like nothing had happened, rattling off assignments, patrol routes, updated alerts. But Ryan could feel it. His name wasn't mentioned, not once. And when the assignments were passed out, his usual partner, Officer Diaz, stepped aside to join another team. No explanation, just a glance. Sharp and unreadable, Ryan moved to protest, but the commander cut him off before he could speak. Officer Keller. "Stay behind." The room cleared. Silence. Captain Mendez entered through the back door. No folder, no notes, just a long stare. "I got a call this morning," he said. "Not from City Hall, from D.C. Ryan's stomach flipped. "The woman you arrested. She's involved in a federal anti-corruption task force, deep undercover. You may have just compromised years of work." Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came out. The captain stepped closer. "You racially profiled a federal agent, on record, on video, and now the agency is watching us." "I didn't know," Ryan said. "That's the problem," Mendez snapped. "You didn't care." The captain threw a file onto the table. IA opened a review. "You're on desk duty until further notice." Ryan's blood ran cold. "Captain, please. I can fix this. I didn't mean..." "You don't fix something like this with words. You fix it with change, real change. But frankly, Ryan," he leaned in, "I don't think you're capable." Ryan stood there, numb, as the captain left him alone in the room. Outside, his fellow officers avoided his eyes. Inside, his world was starting to collapse. The debriefing room at the Homeland Subdivision field office was a sterile box of glass and metal, no windows, no clocks, no names on the door. Only a single chair, a round table, and two agents across from her. Agent Langston sat upright, uncuffed, her face unreadable. "You had a badge," said Agent Tompkins, one of the internal reviewers. "Why didn't you show it when the officer arrested you?" Langston didn't blink. "Because I knew he wouldn't ask." Agent Mera tilted her head. "You were undercover, but he wasn't your target. You weren't supposed to engage." "I didn't," Langston replied calmly. Tompkins leaned forward. "You let it happen. You let him arrest you." "I let him reveal who he really was." That line hung in the air like smoke. They paused, wrote something down. Then Mera asked, "You said you're making a mistake," but said nothing more. "Why?" Langston's lips curved into the faintest expression of irony. "Because that was the only warning he deserved." Outside the room, Director Laura James watched through the mirrored glass. She'd overseen dozens of field agents, broken hundreds of operations, but never had she seen someone so dangerously still. Langston wasn't hiding. She was waiting. Back inside, Tompkins asked, "You're aware your arrest went viral. It may compromise your cover moving forward." "I won't need the same cover again," she said. "I'm changing strategy." "Meaning?" Langston finally met his eyes. "This country doesn't need more hidden witnesses. It needs visible consequences." She rose to her feet. "Are we done?" Tompkins hesitated. "For now." Langston stepped out, nodded at the director, and continued down the hallway like a soldier returning from the front. Outside the building, a group of journalists clustered behind barricades. No one noticed her. No one recognized her. Just another black woman walking down the street. And that, she thought, was still her deadliest weapon. Ryan Keller sat behind the front desk at Precinct 12, watching the minutes tick by. He'd never realized how loud a clock could sound when you had nothing to do but listen. The phones rang non-stop. Most calls weren't about crime, they were about him. "I want to file a complaint against Officer Keller. Is it true he arrested an FBI agent? My son saw the video. What are you doing about it?" Dispatcher Martinez handled most of them, but her glances toward Ryan were more frequent now, short, sharp, and full of something unspoken. He shuffled paperwork, logged timestamps, refiled old reports just to stay busy, but nothing could stop the knot tightening in his chest. On break, he sat in the locker room, scrolling through comments under the video. Some people defended him, most didn't. This man shouldn't wear a badge. Imagine how many lives he's ruined that weren't federal agents. What if she hadn't been FBI? Ryan threw the phone down. Evans walked in mid-moment. She stared at him, expression unreadable. "You seeing this?" He muttered. "I saw it days ago." She didn't say who she was. She didn't have to. "I did what I thought was right." Evans shook her head slowly. "You thought she was homeless. That's the problem, Keller. You didn't ask. You didn't wonder. You assumed." He wanted to snap back, but he didn't. She walked past him, paused, then added softly, "You weren't trained to see threats. You were trained to see them." The door clicked behind her. Later that afternoon, 2 protests showed up at the precinct entrance, quiet, holding signs. One read, "Wrongfully cuffed, rightfully exposed." The other, "What if she were my mom?" Ryan watched from behind the glass. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The silence said everything. Captain Mendez stood in his office, blinds drawn, phone pressed to his ear. "I understand, ma'am. But with all due respect, pulling him immediately might create the impression—" He paused, listening. "No, I'm not defending him. I'm saying we need to follow protocol if we want this to hold weight when the review closes." The line clicked dead. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. Just this week, he'd received calls from the mayor's office, civilian oversight, internal affairs, and now the DOJ. Each conversation added weight to the boulder already balanced on his back. He turned toward the precinct window. Downstairs, Keller was seated at the front desk, back hunched, eyes on a stack of incident logs he wasn't even reading. To Mendez, he didn't look like a threat anymore. He looked like a man who'd just begun to understand his own insignificance. His door knocked once. It was Deputy Chief Rennick. Tight suit, sterner eyes. "We're being watched," Rennick said without preamble. "They want to make an example." Of Keller? Of the whole damn department? Mendez sat. Rennick laid a folder on the desk. Photos, reports, a timeline of complaints Keller had received over the years. Most dismissed, others quietly redirected, one resolved with counseling. It painted a picture, not a single mistake, of a pattern. "We sweep this under the rug," Rennick said. "And the rug's coming with it." Mendez tapped the photo of Langston in the file, still from the arrest video, her eyes clear and calm despite the cuffs. "She didn't flinch," he murmured. "She knew what would happen," Rennick replied. "She wanted it on tape." Mendez leaned back, looking around his office. The plaques, the commendations, the old photo of his first academy class. "You ever ask yourself," he said quietly, "how many we've lost because we promoted the wrong ones?" Rennick didn't answer. He didn't have to. The studio lights were low and warm, casting soft halos across the polished desk where Agent Langston sat. The show was called Civic Line, a quiet but credible weekly program known for its long form. Interviews with people who never chased headlines until the headlines chased them. The host, Lena Porter, had a reputation for restraint. She didn't interrupt. She didn't push. And Langston had chosen her for exactly that reason. The segment began with a montage, news clips, soundless footage of the arrest, headlines scrolling past, FBI agent arrested in mistaken identity incident, video goes viral, racial profiling, or simple misjudgment. Then a fade into the live conversation. Langston sat still, hands folded, hair pulled back, no makeup beyond the basics. She looked like any other woman who had something important to say, and no need to prove it. Lena began gently. "Why now?" Langston looked straight into the lens. "Because silence hasn't worked. Did you feel unsafe during the arrest?" "No." "You looked calm." "I was." "Why?" Langston exhaled slowly. "Because I knew what he didn't, that his mistake would outlive his badge." Lena leaned in. "Do you believe what happened to you happens often?" Langston nodded once. "Yes, but most people don't have the badge I carry, or the clearance, or the public spotlight." "So what makes this different?" Langston's voice never rose. "Because I wasn't powerless, and because millions saw it happen." The screen cut briefly to audience reactions online, duets on TikTok, emotional stitches, people of color sharing stories in solidarity. Hashtags trended, artists painted murals of her face, always calm, always watching. Back in the studio, Lena asked him, "What do you want to happen now?" Langston didn't flinch. "I want departments to be afraid of silence. I want officers to fear assumptions more than bullets. I want reform that survives elections." Lena hesitated, then asked the final question. "And Officer Keller?" Langston's gaze sharpened just slightly. "I don't need him to be punished. I need the system that built him to be dismantled." The screen faded to black. The interview ended, and the movement began. The knock on the precinct's front door wasn't loud, but it echoed like thunder through the reception area. Two plainclothes officers from Internal Affairs stepped inside, flashing badges and signing into the logbook with slow, deliberate pens. Captain Mendez met them in the hallway. "You here for Keller?" The taller one, Ramirez, nodded. "And his files." They weren't here to talk. They were here to audit. By mid-morning, Officer Keller sat in interview room B, a space he'd once used to interrogate suspects. Now, the tables had turned, literally. Detective Ramirez flipped open a binder. "Over the past 7 years, you've logged more field arrests than any other patrol officer in the district," he began. "High productivity, commendations, good reviews." Keller nodded slightly. Ramirez turned the page. "But there's a pattern. Your arrests disproportionately target black citizens. You've initiated stops at twice the rate of your peers, and complaints filed against you, 32. Only one ever escalated." Keller blinked. "That's not unusual." "For this district?" "No. That's the problem." He leaned forward. "Do you remember a Ms. Delilah Ross?" Ryan's mind spun. The name was familiar, faint, buried. 3 years ago," Ramirez continued, "you stopped her on suspicion of loitering. No charges filed, but her report describes being humiliated, cuffed, and left face down for 30 minutes. She was walking home from her second job." Keller stared at the table. "She filed a complaint. It was lost, later withdrawn." He shifted uncomfortably. "Do you remember her now?" Ramirez asked again. Keller didn't answer. "Her daughter saw the video of Langston," Ramirez said, quietly. "She came forward last night." The silence in the room was suffocating. "This isn't about one agent anymore, Officer Keller. It's about a pattern, one that's bigger than you, and may not end with you." As they gathered his files and exited the room, Keller sat alone. For the first time, the badge on his chest didn't feel like protection, it felt like evidence. It began with a ripple, a repost here, a comment there. Then came the duets, the re-edits, the stitched videos with side-by-side comparisons, Langston's quiet restraint against Keller's aggression. The contrast was undeniable, and soon the ripple turned tidal. By the end of the week, the footage had reached 25 million views. Protest signs showed up not just in front of Keller's precinct, but across cities nationwide. From Detroit to Dallas, Baltimore to Baton Rouge, chants echoed in parks, campuses, subway stations. She had a badge. What if she didn't? Assumption is not law. Protect and serve, not judge and swerve. Victims from Keller's past stepped forward. Not all had names people remembered, but their stories struck a nerve. A school janitor, a teenage delivery boy, a mother outside, a grocery store. Each had been stopped, searched, dismissed. Some had never spoken. Some had tried. Now the world was listening. Social media exploded with the hashtag #JackSilentNoMore. Celebrities reposted Langston's quotes. Artists painted murals of her face, stoic, unbroken, powerful. Podcasts dissected the case. News outlets ran hour-long specials, but perhaps the loudest shift came from the quietest corners: church basements, barber shops, book clubs, dinner tables. Did you see what that cop did? Imagine if she weren't FBI. Maybe it's always been like this. The conversations grew. At Precinct 12, the atmosphere turned electric. Officers whispered. Some sympathized with Keller. Most stayed silent, but every eye held a question. How many others? Inside the locker room, Keller scrolled his phone in a days trending. Soon fire Keller, new testimony surfaces. DOJ, open civil rights inquiry. He clicked a video of a woman he'd once detained in a convenience store lot. She spoke through tears. He said, "I looked suspicious. I was pregnant, just trying to buy milk." Keller closed the app. He leaned back against the cold tile wall, heart pounding. For the first time, it hit him. This wasn't just backlash. This was reckoning, and it had his name carved across the front lines. Ryan Keller sat in his car long after his shift ended. The engine was off. The air inside was still. Outside, the world moved without him, commuters rushing, horns blaring, the city pulsing like a living thing that no longer had room for him. He stared at the rearview mirror, but the face staring back didn't look like his own. He looked older, angrier, tired in a way he couldn't explain. His jaw clenched by habit now. His eyes weren't sharp, they were defensive, paranoid. He whispered out loud, "I'm not a bad person." The words didn't sound right. He said them again, still hollow. The truth was, Keller had built his identity around his badge, around the image of control, the uniform, the rules, the power. He didn't question them. He didn't need to. He followed the code, the one written between the lines. See something, control it. If they talk back, they're trouble. But now he wasn't sure what he saw in people anymore. Not criminals, not threats, just fear. Had they always looked at him that way? He remembered Langston's eyes, unshaken, not angry, just knowing. She saw through him, not just the uniform, him. A knock on his window jolted him. Officer Evans. She leaned in. "You okay?" He nodded stiffly. She didn't believe it. "I'm doing house visits now," she said. "They're digging deep. You might want to talk to someone." "Like who?" She paused. "Like anyone who'll tell you the truth." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Ryan, this job doesn't make us who we are. It just shows us what we're willing to excuse." That night he sat on his couch, laptop open, the video of the arrest playing again. He watched it without sound, watched his face, watched hers, paused it. There was no hate in her expression, only judgment, but not the kind handed down in court. The unkind handed down in silence, in consequence, in truth. He closed the laptop. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a cop. He felt like a man being seen, without a badge to hide behind. The hearing room was colder than Keller expected. Fluorescent. Lights buzzed overhead. A long table stretched across the room, behind which sat the disciplinary review board. 3 senior officers, 1 civilian oversight liaison, and a legal observer from the DOJ. Keller stood in his dress uniform, pressed, stiff, pointless. Captain Mendez sat nearby, unreadable. Across the aisle, a familiar figure entered, calm, unannounced, and devastatingly composed. Agent Langston. She didn't speak, didn't glance his way. She took a seat in the back row, crossed her legs, and simply waited. The board chair began. Officer Ryan Keller. You've been summoned today to respond to the findings of internal affairs and to determine whether you remain fit to serve in uniform under this department. Every word chipped at his spine. This hearing will cover not just your recent arrest of Agent Langston, but your long-term conduct, patterns, complaints, behavioral records, and the cumulative impact of your service on the public trust. The floor open to the IA Rep.A slideshow began. Cold, methodical, brutal photos, body cam clips, complaint records. A timeline of Keller's career, not as he remembered it, but as others lived through it. Each incident layered over the next. He watched himself shove a teenager to the ground for matching a description. He heard himself threaten a man for asking a question. He saw a little boy crying in the back seat of a car as Keller interrogated his father outside. "I was following procedure," Keller said once, weakly. One board member raised a hand. "And when you cuffed a federal agent without probable cause," Keller said nothing. Langston still hadn't moved, but he could feel her watching, not with her eyes, but with her presence. He swallowed hard. She never resisted. "She told me I was making a mistake. I didn't listen." Silence. "Why didn't you ask who she was?" someone asked. Keller stared at the table. "I thought I already knew." That answer hung in the room, a mirror turned toward everyone. After the hearing, as the board deliberated, Keller stepped outside into the hallway. Langston stood there. She didn't speak, didn't glare, just looked at him. And for the first time, Keller didn't feel challenged. He felt dismantled, like the badge wasn't just cracking, it had already shattered. The announcement came on a Thursday. The Department of Justice launched a federal review into policing practices in 5 major U.S. cities, starting with West Halden. Langston's case had triggered something too large to contain. Her silence, her restraint, her refusal to lash out. They'd left no distractions for the public or politicians to hide behind. The conversation could no longer be avoided. News outlets reported around the clock. Interviews with community leaders, professors, former officers. National figures weighed in. Congressional hearings began drafting legislation for accountability tracking, bias pattern detection, and civilian empowerment boards. For once, the momentum didn't fade after a week. At Precinct 12, the shift was visceral. Locker room talk grew quieter. Jokes that once flew freely now died in people's throats. Young officers looked unsure. Older ones looked uncomfortable. Evans noticed. "It first. They're waking up," she said to Captain Mendez. He nodded. "Problem is, half of them are scared of the dark now." Mendez had submitted his own proposal, a voluntary internal audit. Bodycam review by community-appointed panels. Bias training beyond checkbox modules. "Better we walk forward on our own," he told the chief, "than be dragged by the neck." Langston, meanwhile, stayed out of the spotlight. She didn't need it. Her impact moved without her through policies, lawsuits, reforms. She became an icon, not because she demanded justice, but because she let the injustice speak for itself. And Keller? His name remained at the center, but his voice had vanished. No interviews, no posts, no denials. He was suspended without pay. Stripped of badge, weapon, and title, awaiting a final verdict. At night he wandered past the precinct, hoodie pulled low, face half-shadowed. No one noticed him. No one called him officer. For the first time in his life, he felt invisible, and, for the first time, he understood what that meant. Isaiah Langston sat at the kitchen table, spinning a pencil between his fingers. The news was playing in the living room. Again, his mother's face filled the screen. Again. But this time, the anchor wasn't talking about violence or protest. They were talking about change. He didn't understand all the big words yet. Reform, policy shifts, institutional reckoning. But he knew enough. He saw the way people looked at his mom now. He saw the way teachers paused when they said his last name. The way his friends whispered, "That's her son." His mom never mentioned, The video. She never talked about the cop. She made pancakes, drove him to practice, asked about math homework. But the world around them had changed, and he was old enough to feel it. At school, someone had drawn his mom's face in chalk on the sidewalk, crowned her head with golden lines like sunlight. Isaiah stared at it before walking past, unsure whether to be proud or embarrassed. At lunch, his friend Malik asked, "Is it true your mom works for, like, the FBI freaking B?" Isaiah nodded. "And she got arrested on purpose just to catch a crooked cop?" He shrugged. "Sort of," Malik grinned. "That's crazy cool." That night, Isaiah sat with his mom on the couch. The room was quiet. She was reading. "Why didn't you tell them who you were?" he asked softly. Langston looked over at him. "Because sometimes people need to show who they are first." He thought about that. "You weren't scared?" "I was prepared." He leaned against her arm. "People think you're like a superhero now," she smiled faintly. "I'm not. You kinda are to me." She kissed the top of his head, and in that small, quiet moment, Isaiah understood something deeper than words. His mother hadn't just survived injustice, she'd taught it a lesson. And the world? I was still learning. The library was nearly empty, the kind of quiet that wrapped around the walls like a blanket too heavy to lift. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Every sound echoed louder than it should. A clock ticked somewhere, disinterested and slow. Langston sat at the far end of a long wooden table, back straight, coat still on, eyes fixed on the double doors. He was 10 minutes late, but he showed. Ryan Keller stepped in with hesitant steps, dressed plainly. No badge, no belt, just jeans and a weathered jacket that hung heavy on his frame. He looked around, spotted her, then approached like someone asking permission to speak. Langston said nothing, just gestured toward the chair across from her. He sat. There was a moment where neither spoke. The air between them wasn't tense, but charged, like something important was about to be said, and both already knew it wouldn't make anything easier. Keller finally broke the silence. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "You're lucky I did," she replied, cool but calm. He nodded. "Yeah, I know." He looked down at the table, then back at her. "I've gone over it 100 times. The arrest, that moment, every angle, every second. I still don't know what I was thinking." Langston tilted her head slightly. "That's the part that scares me most." Keller blinked. "I wasn't angry," he continued. "I wasn't even stressed. It was routine. You didn't look like you belonged. That was all it took." Langston folded her hands in front of her. "You arrested a woman, not for breaking the law, but for not fitting your image of who deserved dignity." He winced. "I didn't mean to humiliate you." "You did. I didn't know who you were. That's the point." Keller's voice cracked slightly. "I thought you were homeless." Langston's voice never changed. "And if I was, would that have made it acceptable?" He hesitated, opened his mouth, but there was no good answer. She watched him squirm, then added, "You're not here for me. You're here for you, to fix the version of yourself you thought was the good guy." "I'm sorry," he whispered. Langston looked him dead in the eye. "I don't need your apology." Keller looked down. "I've lost everything." "No," she corrected. "You finally saw what you had built everything on." He shook his head, frustrated. "I trained hard. I studied law. I followed orders." Langston leaned forward. "You followed a culture. One that told you who to watch, who to stop, who to fear. That culture didn't teach you how to listen, or how to recognize power in silence." He swallowed hard. "I've been trying to understand. I watched the video. I see myself in it, and I want to go back and stop it. I want to shake the man I was and scream. Ask her name. Ask what she's doing. See her." "You saw what you wanted to see," Langston replied. "You saw a stereotype, a threat, a shadow." He nodded slowly. "I get that now." "Do you?" Keller didn't answer. Langston stood and reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. I thought about ignoring this request. Thought about never speaking to you again. But then I thought about what accountability actually looks like. She handed him the paper. He unfolded it. 6 names, no last names, no explanations. He looked up. Who are they? People you stopped years ago. They filed complaints that never went anywhere. They were forgotten, but they remember you. His hand trembled. Why give me this? He asked. Langston stared at him, steady and sharp. Because if you want to change, really change, you won't start with me. You'll start with them. Keller's face twisted, a knot of guilt and shame. What am I supposed to say? The truth. And what if they don't forgive me? Langston's answer came like a blade. They don't have to. She turned to leave, but before she reached the exit, Keller called out, Do you believe I can change? Langston paused. I believe you're capable of honesty, she said. Whether you live with it or run from it, that's up to you. She walked through the double doors. No hug, no handshake, no soft absolution, just the sound of her footsteps fading into silence. And Keller, alone at the table, holding 6 names, each one heavier than the badge he'd once used to bury them. The tribunal room was stark. No jury, no cameras, no headlines, just a row of decision-makers seated at a raised table, flanked by flags, framed charters, and silence thick enough to feel like fog. Ryan Keller sat alone. No legal team, no supporters, no badge. He wore a suit that hung loose on his frame, like it belonged to the man he used to be. The head of the disciplinary review board spoke evenly, but the words hit like a slow drumbeat. Based on the findings of Internal Affairs, the Oversight Committee, and the Department of Justice review, this board concludes the following. Keller gripped the edge of his seat. Officer Ryan Keller is hereby permanently terminated from the West Halden Police Department, effective immediately. No protests, no applause, only the dull scratching of pens and the creak of a folding chair as Keller rose slowly to his feet. He didn't argue, he didn't cry, he only nodded once, then walked out the way he came in, quietly. Back through the same hallway he'd once strode through with full authority, only now no one looked him in the eye. He passed bulletin boards where his photo once hung under Officer of the Month. It was gone now, replaced by policy updates and community outreach posters. The past had been scrubbed clean, but the memory wouldn't fade. Not for him, not for anyone. Elsewhere in the city, Langston stood on the top floor of a federal building overlooking the skyline. Her new office was minimalist. Grey tones, one plant, a large desk, and a nameplate freshly installed, Special Advisor, National Civil Rights Oversight Board. She adjusted her blazer in the reflection of the glass and exhaled softly. No adrenaline, no fanfare, just quiet clarity. Langston never wanted to become a symbol, but symbols don't choose themselves. She wasn't there to go viral again. She was there to write policy that could prevent the next Keller. To draft review mechanisms, to sit on panels, to audit reports that once disappeared into clerical errors, no longer undercover, now fully seen. She stepped into the elevator as her assistant handed her a folder. Training session with incoming cadets at 3 p.m. civilian review session after that. DOJ wants your notes on the Memphis audit before Friday. Langston simply nodded. Make sure we include field officers in all pilot programs, she said. Change doesn't start from the top, it starts from the street. Across town, in a 4th-grade classroom, Langston's son, Isaiah, sat beside a digital smartboard showing a still from his mother's interview. The clip paused on the sentence that traveled the world. He thought I had no name, but I had a badge and a story. The classroom was quiet. Not because they were confused, but because they understood. The teacher turned to the students. Does anyone know what that means? One boy raised his hand. It means people think. "If you don't look important, you aren't," a girl added, but she was, even when they couldn't tell. Isaiah sat quietly, staring at the screen. It didn't make him feel famous. It made him feel responsible. At lunch, Malik grinned at him. "Yo, your mom's like real-life Black Panther." Isaiah rolled his eyes but smiled. "She's just Mom." But deep down, he knew better. She wasn't a superhero. She was something scarier, unbreakable. At Precinct 12, Officer Evans leaned against a podium inside the new training room. Fresh recruits sat in rows, stiff-backed and unsure, their uniforms still smelling like packaging. She looked around at their faces. "This job comes with a badge, a gun, and a choice," she said. "And that choice is whether you see people as threats or as stories." She paced slowly, letting the silence do its work. "Ryan Keller wore this badge for 10 years. He followed the procedure. He never questioned his instinct." She tapped the badge over her chest. "This doesn't make you right." One recruit raised a hand. "What happened to him?" "He faced consequences," Evans replied. "But the real question is, what happens after that?" She held up a photo of Langston. "This is the woman he arrested." She looked at them. One by one, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight back. She let the system show itself, and then she changed it. Another pause. "This badge doesn't protect you from accountability. It demands it. Remember that." A few blocks away, Delilah Ross stood in a community center lobby, holding a signed letter from the city, a formal apology and an offer of reconciliation. But more importantly, she was handed a microphone. At a town hall, she stood in front of a crowd. "I don't want vengeance," she said. "I want visibility. I want my name to matter as much as my dignity." The crowd applauded, not for revenge, for truth, and for survival. That same evening, Langston returned to the alley where it all began. Same red brick wall, same metal dumpster, same cracked sidewalk, only this time there was no rain, no cuffs, no assumptions. She sat for a moment on the edge of the curb, letting the breeze carry city noise around her. A patrol car passed. The officer inside slowed, rolled down the window. A young Latina woman with wary eyes. Langston turned slightly. The officer nodded respectfully. Langston nodded back. Then the cruiser rolled on. Langston stood, brushed off her coat and began walking, not back into hiding, not into the spotlight, but into the long, thankless, necessary work of watching the watchers. Change had not come fast. It had not come clean. But it had come, because silence was not the end. It was only the beginning.